Hi, welcome back to the Thomas Jefferson podcast. Today we will be discussing a day in the life of a slave at Monticello. Thomas Jefferson once said, "I am as happy nowhere else and in no other society." This is because he had a great love for his home, land, and gardens. First, let's talk about his home. It's located in Charlottesville, Virginia. Monticello actually means little mountain in Old Italian. It's called Monticello because its main house, sits on a hill 867 feet high. This home started to grow and grow until it was a 5-farm, 5,000-acre plantation. Jefferson was given this land in 1764 from his father and didn't begin building on it until 5 years later. The home he built was very different from the homes at the time. It had a neoclassical look with a dome. Jefferson designed the home all by himself. Even though he had no experience as an architect, he was still very interested in architecture. He actually read many books about building. Architecture was not Jefferson's only interest. He was an exceptional writer. He wrote the Declaration of Independence, governed Virginia. He was a minister to France. He was a president of the United States from 1801 to 1809. And then when he retired from all of those duties, he decided to found the University of Virginia. Now that we've discussed the home and Jefferson's background, let's discuss the domestic life at Monticello. Like I've said before, the home sits on 5,000 acres. All of these acres need worked and tended, so there are many families that live there to tend the land. When Jefferson retired from his presidency, there was 202 people living there. However, he was only left with one of his 2 daughters. His wife had already passed, and he buried one of his daughters during his presidency. But the other daughter came to live with him on the mountain. His daughter was married, and they had 8 children. Along with the large Jefferson family, there was many enslaved families as well. They were all related to Betty Hemings. She was the original slave owned by the Jeffersons. The enslaved families completed many tasks on the land, such as watching the children, cooking, cleaning, welding, gardening, and even more. Now that we've discussed domestic life, let's discuss how Thomas Jefferson loved to garden. He called the location of Monticello the perfect description of a workhouse of nature. He took great pride in his gardens and kind of turned them into his own little experimental laboratory. He did observations of the way the wind moved and when the plants began to bloom. He kept all of these records in his garden book. Jefferson understood that he would have bad years in the garden and shared these struggles with other farmers. While other farmers weren't always open to sharing these struggles, Jefferson didn't care because he knew it was a part of planting and learning. He experimented with planting different foods across the world. While he may have found it fun for him to plant all of these different types of food and plants, he did it to improve the life of his neighbors. You may wonder why it improved the life of his neighbors, but opening his neighbors up to new and different things from around the world broadened everyone's horizons. His garden consisted of many exotic and native plants. Jefferson did not like to make his garden the best for him, but it was for everyone. He enjoyed making up little competitions that would allow him and his neighbors to compete. For example, they had a sweet pea competition to see whose sweet peas would bloom first in the spring. After giving you a complete tour of Monticello, I think we can all understand why Jefferson once said, "I am happy nowhere else and in any other society." Thank you for listening in today on the Thomas Jefferson podcast to discuss a day in the life of Monticello. I look forward to having you all come back and listen in next week for our next podcast about Thomas Jefferson. Thank you and have a good night.